So, Dave, we have a wordsmith on the show today.
One of the wordy Smiths guys around.
Wordy Smiths guys around, yes. He's a former reporter with credits like the City News Bureau, United Press International, Radio Free Europe, Chicago Tribune, now also a novelist. His debut novel is about that gritty world of reporting, and it's called The Kiss of Night. Today we're going to be talking to Mark Wukas.
The following is a Tony Lasano podcast, an Opie show on the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. This is the Minutia Man Celebrity Interview with Rick and Dave.
So, Dave, we don't normally interview novelists on this show, but I love this novel. To me, The Kiss of Night is like a love letter to hardworking journalists, and they need this right now. The City News Bureau, which no longer exists.
No, everything's fine, Rick. There's no censorship. Everything is fine.
Everything's fine. The City News Bureau, which no longer exists, is like a character in this book. And Mark, while you're here with us, can you tell younger readers who might not be familiar with it what City News Bureau even is or was?
Right, and explain to them what a newspaper is, too, because they may not know either.
City News Bureau served several purposes when it existed. First, it was owned by all the Chicago newspapers, and it was considered a training ground for young men and women who wanted to be reporters and then would be hired by the dailies when this city supported 4 daily newspapers. At least that was my lifetime. There used to be more. And basically it was the nuts and bolts stuff, starting with police reporting. And then you'd move up to rewrite. So you'd be pulled into the office, and then you'd be signed a beat like the courts or the Cook County Jail or City Hall or stuff like that. And after 2-3 years for the slower types, you were taken on at a daily newspaper, which would then where you'd sit for the rest of your life until it's where you sit for the rest of your life. It's funny, I went to a public relations convention once, and I was and it was I was sitting with some former City News guys who just said, you'll leave journalism, you'll end up in PR, because that's really where the money is. You'll get sick of being underpaid and overworked. And I did kind of go that route at the end before going back to teaching. So, but it was more fun than I could stand. I'll say that.
Well, and you were young. How old were you? You were young when you worked there, right?
Actually, I was a late bloomer. I was 27 when I worked for City News, which put me 3 to 5 years older than most of my peers, which then was a major age factor.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so you had some life experience before you even started there, right?
I did, grad school, teaching for 2 years at my high school alma mater on the South Side. And then I left that to go into journalism. Within a year I was at City News Bureau, and boy, that was an eye opener. I mean, I thought I was streetwise when I lived on the South Side, but City News Bureau, man.
Well, Dave is an inner city guy himself.
Yeah, I could tell you stories, Mark, about living in Rogers Park. Really, actually, not even quite Rogers Park, Edgewater. Well, that's your second novel.
Yeah,
I will help you.
David, did you live in the Kenmore-Winthrop corridor?
I lived Granville and Lakewood. So, but then I moved to Sheridan and Rosemont, which was near there, and there was quite a few.
There was
characters.
An infamous high crime neighborhood. In the day.
That's why he's so tough.
No one messed with me, Mark. Though.
I don't doubt it.
Yeah, you're not going to want to tangle with this.
Well, I mean, so we're joking about it, but you really did capture a time and place in this book. I mean, it was a different Chicago. It was a less gentrified. It was a grittier, more like a rough and tumble Chicago of the 1980s. And I knew that you were in tune with that time when the cover was being designed for your book, because you're like, that building wasn't in the skyline in the 80s. I mean, That's how much you knew what was going on at that time. So, I mean, talk about what Chicago was like during the time that the book is set. It's set in the 80s, right?
Well, let's go back 10 years before that. In 1971, my first job, my first high school job was working as an Annie Frame usher.
Okay.
If you guys are old enough to remember
Yeah,
that.
sure.
What stadium did you go all over, or was it
all over? But my first assignment in June of 1971 was going to Wrigley Field. So I hopped what was then the Red Line or the Englewood Line,
Englewood Jackson Park,
Yep.
Yeah, Englewood, yeah.
Yep, you've got it. And I went up to Wrigley, and my mom, as I was leaving the door, warned me. She said, you be careful up there because that neighborhood's full of hillbillies. It's like, what?
I know.
And she meant, Appalachians. And Wrigleyville was not gentrified in 71.
It was not.
Well,
it was a regular old neighborhood with regular old people who,
Well, they filmed Deliverance there.
Yeah, exactly.
I thought you were serious for a second there.
So 10 years later, I'm at City News, and the neighborhood is just starting to get gentrified, and but it was still kind of rough. Clark Street in those days was always dodgy at all hours, and it was just it was a vibrant, changing neighborhood. You had, the gay men moving into what is now referred to as Boys Town, which in the 70s was called Newtown.
Right.
If you guys remember that.
Yeah.
When they tried to stick. So it was always an adventure. And, you had to watch where you park, and you had to, always watch for shadows behind you and that sort of thing. I was on edge.
Well, thank God you survived that turbulent time.
Well,
by the way, that comes through in the pages of the book. I think you portray the neighborhood beautifully and what sort of things were going on. I don't want to tell too much about the plot because when you're reading a novel, you don't want all your spoilers.
No.
But
right.
Let's just say that Chicago is a character.
Well, that's what I was just going to say. That I thought that Chicago really did. It's a huge character in the book, and this question is what are some of your favorite Chicago places or landmarks there?
Well, Chicago absolutely is the greatest city in the world. Friends have tried to get me journalism jobs at papers they work with. A friend tried to lure me to CNN. Another friend into the Gannett system, and I just refuse to leave this city. Yeah. I did it once. I worked for Radio Free Europe in Munich, and that was, a short stint. And I just was thinking at the end of it there, I just got to go back to Chicago. So the city is just, it's got everything. And when people talk of it as a melting pot, it's not. It's more of a quilt of neighborhoods. And my father grew up just north of Comiskey Park in a Croatian neighborhood. And my mother was an Ohio WASP. So I'm the product of a mixed marriage.
Yeah.
But my dad knew his way around the city. And then when I was a frame, taking the L everywhere, or buses to get to jobs and stuff like that, it just, you pick up a vibe for the city. I started reading Studs Terkel. I read the Studs Lonigan trilogy. And one of my favorite things in high school was to go to the top of the Hancock building.
Top of the cock, right?
And just watch the sunset. It goes from daylight to moonlight. And the way the city winks on, you just think everybody doing everything out there. Yeah. And you just want to launch yourself into all of it. It was just great.
And as a reporter, it's when you're working at City News Bureau, it's at night usually, right?
Yeah.
So you're really seeing a different part of Chicago than most people see.
that was true. And I thought I'd have seen a little bit of it, but man, when you start doing medical examiner cases, anytime anybody dies in Cook County, we had, and not attended by a physician, we had to do a story. So you get the list of the newly dead from the coroner's office or the medical examiner, and start making phone calls to hospitals. And if you get, if they just find a body somewhere, name unknown, address unknown, age unknown, and then tell you to call Cook County Hospital, it's like they don't have any idea who this person is any more than I am. That's why you call the police where they found the area where they found the body, and then it was a process.
Yeah.
And you really got to know the block to block gradations that up and down the socioeconomic scale that in the city. God, it's just the best education.
Well, and I could, we can tell from how passionate you are, about Chicago, and certainly, like Rick said, it is definitely a character in the book, Yeah,
and I always wanted to capture the city and put it in a book. And I remember while I was writing this, there was an article in some newspaper, 10 best books about journalism. And I'd read maybe 4 of them. And I just thought, would my book make this list? And it just made me want to redouble my efforts. I mean, it's not as funny as Evelyn Waugh's Scoop. And it definitely, I try to overwhelm the reader with what they're surrounded by, but have no clue exists.
Yeah. Well, even the news gathering part of your novel doesn't exist anymore, really. I mean, the City News Bureau is gone. The Tribune and Sun-Times hanging on by a thread. Local TV news, which you lampoon a little bit in there. It's a shell of its former self. So
true. The internet has not lived up to its promise. I will say that.
Right.
And especially when any jackass with a computer and an ISP can go online and present his opinions as fact.
Or do a podcast, too.
Hey.
They're the worst.
Yeah, I know.
Who's vetting this? Is Trump
Nobody. That's the wonderful part about it.
No idea.
Once
this gets to the White House, he's going to try to Harvardize you guys and get you to walk the line.
Yeah, we've had on Anthony Scaramucci, and we haven't gotten any problems. So I think
I'm sure he's on the list, but I haven't gotten to all the people that are on his list yet. So I think we're still safe at this point.
So, what are some of your favorite Chicago places or landmarks that were around at the time of this novel, but which are no longer around? Think back to the time of the novel. What do you wish still was around?
O'Rourke's, which was a journalism bar on North Avenue in Orleans, I think. And the bartender, Jay, was a congenial, literate host. And, a lot of people from there was a progression. After the Sun-Times and Tribune reporters got off work, they go to the Billy Goat. Right. And then if you wanted to keep rolling, it was O'Rourke's. And then once O'Rourke's closed at 2, you'd go to the Old Town Ale House,
right,
which was 3 blocks east, and that was a 4 a.m. license.
Bruce.
And getting off at 2 in the morning, man, I think I knew every 4 a.m. joint on the north side.
Yeah, I bet. And Roger Ebert used to hang out at those places, too.
Yes, he did. He was, especially O'Rourke's.
Yeah.
Especially O'Rourke's. And then it just got to be too much. A friend of mine said they saw him fall off a bar stool once, and then that's when he decided to stop drinking, and God bless him for it, because
but you just stopped drinking that night, right?
At some point he had to, but alcoholism, was another occupational hazard in journalism that I didn't really get into in the book, because I worked with some tertiary alcoholics who were the best goddamn writers you'd ever just
Well, I knew I knew Mike Royko, and boy, that he was, if he wasn't clinically identified as such, as close as you can get to it.
No, yeah, I walked in 20 minutes after he had the famous fight with Bernie Judge.
Yeah.
in the Billy Goat. But I have a friend who witnessed it, the guy I was going to go drink with, and he wrote an amazing account of that evening. And poor Bernie got, and God bless both their souls, since they passed. But they represented an era that just doesn't exist. I saw a copy of the Trib the other day, and it looked like an advertising flyer.
Oh yeah, it's like the thrifty nickel.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, and I teach college kids. Nobody reads a newspaper. I mean, in fact, I'm not sure they could even name both the newspapers in the city. They don't listen to radio. They get their news from TikTok, which I'm sure is going to be fine.
My kids are like that.
Yeah, I just think of Cicero as saying, "O tempora, o mores." What times we live in, what declining standards, and I think this lack of curated, disciplined, professional news gathering, or at least we've lost our voice, I think is part of what allowed Trump to come to power and all of his shills. And it's just not good for the national discourse. I mean, where are the Cronkites today? Where are the Dan Rathers? Where are the...
Well, the problem is it seems like there's more news and information than there ever was, but it's an illusion because the number of news gatherers, this is like one of my pet peeves. The news gatherers, the guys who are actually reporting the news,
there's six of them.
That's being cut back all the time.
Yeah.
And you get to the point where there are entire states in America that have no newspapers at all.
Yeah.
That don't cover anything.
David, who's producing we're swamped by it, even though the good stuff's diminishing. So who's doing the producing of news now, like Reddit, Politico?
Yeah,
right.
I don't know. I fear for the world.
Yeah.
Oh, it'll be fine.
Yeah, it's fine. Let's talk about something a little more upbeat, and that is the Magicus sign that is a landmark in Chicago. It's in the title of your book, which is The Kiss of Night. It's part of the cover. It's part of the storyline. First of all, tell us why you chose to include that in the book, and secondly, why isn't the Empire Carpet Man in this book at any point?
Here's the first time I was going through I didn't read The Great Gatsby until I got to college. And being a South Sider, I would, hop on the Rhine, go down to Champaign, and there would be the Magicus Lips at 87th and the Dan Ryan. And I thought, if I ever write a novel about this city, I'm going to use the Magicus Lips the way Fitzgerald used the eyes of Dr. Eckelberg. And it became sort of a running joke among friends that I had down at college who were in the class and reading and all that kind of thing. And then I learned that there were Magicus Lips at Cicero and the Eisenhower.
Yep.
And then at Montrose and the Kennedy.
That's the one I remember is the one on the Kennedy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in my novel, I'm vague on geography, but I moved the Magicus Lips about 3 or 4 miles south.
Right.
The ones on the Kennedy.
And we are getting hundreds of emails about it.
Complaints.
Damn it.
Yeah.
This is bullshit. Fake
He's
news.
a liar.
Fake news. One of the things that you tackled, I thought, really well in the novel is the relationship between Chicago Caps and the neighborhoods that they had their beats in, and how difficult they had keeping order. But I thought that you really portrayed it with really great compassion for both sides.
One of my former students is a retired Chicago Police Department captain, And I sent him a copy of the book. And he said, my wife's the reader, but I'll read your book. And he sent the nicest note back saying that I captured, that I didn't, he'd never read a cop book like this, and that I capture the gray. It's not right or wrong, good and bad. It is just all this, how can I put it? The moral gray.
Yeah.
It's like, nobody wants to do the wrong thing. Everybody thinks they're doing the right thing at the same time. They just, and that's where they conflict. And so, with Sergeant Foley, in this thing, he thinks he's doing the right thing. And even though, and all the cops just think they're doing the right thing too. And it's only people outside the force who think, well, maybe that's a little off.
Right.
Or whatever. But
they were doing the best they could.
They're doing the best they could with the tools they had. And I think cops deserve a lot more sympathy than they get, because man, oh man, are they on the line.
It's a tough
and
job.
You hear about these off-duty cops who are in convenience stores or in the neighborhood that are going to be robbed at the time they're standing in there, and end up getting shot themselves as they try to intervene, even though they're off duty.
Yeah, right.
Their sense of justice and doing the right thing and is admirable in every way.
Yeah.
And I just I had a cousin who was on the force, and we would talk every now and again about his tough years. And then one night he pulled me over for a traffic violation. I made an illegal left. No, he caught. But when I recognized him, he told his partner, like, "No ticket, it's my cousin," which is a Chicago thing too, I guess.
Oh, totally.
Oh,
you mentioned your former students. Your book party.
Oh my God!
Dave and I met. A bunch of them. We were there too. Your book launch party. What an amazing crowd! Luminaries. Some of your former guys that go all the way back to high school. Go back to your days with the Daily Illini at the University of Illinois. Friends, relatives, fans. I mean,
you were beloved. You're
packed.
beloved. Yeah.
It looked like you were really in your element that day. What was that day like for you?
I was. Well, first of all, at 11 o'clock that morning, I was shitting bricks because I just thought, no one's going to come to this. I've just ordered $500 worth of pizza that I'm going to have to take home.
Which was very good. Which was very good, by the way.
Most of which was eaten by Dave.
Yeah.
It was Giordano's thin crust.
Not bad.
Really? I didn't get one piece, but I thought, the pizza vanished, so I was gratified by that. But I had friends from every walk of life. I had high school classmates. I had my high school guidance counselor there, this 86-year-old priest to whom I dedicated the book. Mm-hmm. I had college journal friends who became professional journalism friends who are still in the biz, who are writing. One of us who were in my writing group in the 80s, and one of those guys, gets published in the New Yorker, and he worked for The Simpsons as a producer for a while. I mean, and then a lot of department colleagues when I taught English up at New Trier. Mm-hmm. A lot of former students, a lot of former runners, because I was a cross country and track coach. So it was just I was flattered and humbled by it all.
Well, your students, you're beloved. I mean, we got a chance to talk to many of them, and you made definitely an impact on their lives.
Of course, we didn't talk to the ones that didn't come, and they probably
screw them.
Picture on a dartboard,
right?
In
exactly.
a basement somewhere. But.
It was not a scientific sampling.
It was not.
It was a friendly crowd, but whatever.
Yeah, the ones who didn't like me didn't show.
No, it was great.
So I'm gratified. People who have bought the book a week and a half ago are now getting back to me saying, how much they enjoyed it, and and just I heard from a woman I work with at City News just this morning who said you really captured it. So, now we just have to get word of mouth and that sort of thing, get it out there. But
speaking of that, where can people
where can you get this phenomenal book? And talk about
right
your
now, I know that
too.
it's being promoted by Eckhart's Press, and
how'd you get a hold of those guys?
Well, let me compliment you guys.
Please do. That's why you're on the show here, Mark. Let's go.
Well, there are a lot of reasons, but I will say this: that when that first box of books arrived, and I saw the quality of the paper,
that's
and the art and all.
Now we're talking. 60 pounds.
It was
60-pound virgin uncoated, buddy.
I was so impressed. I was so impressed. And I read Rick's book on the Loop, and thought, these guys are serious. They do a good job here, and man, when my copy showed up, and that, we went, and the designer Jeff and I went back and forth on the cover a few times, but I think he nailed it.
Yeah,
and I'm really happy with that cover.
You should actually have gotten your second box today. I think. Did you go downstairs? Because I think you're...
Not yet. Somebody, the downstairs people told me something showed up.
That's a little behind the scenes,
I think we can handle this offline. Our listeners probably aren't that excited about that part, but I just wanted to thank you for being on the show. And really, when I tell you how much I love this book, I don't say that because Dave and I know how hard it is to sell a novel, and it's got to be really good for us to want to publish it, and this
it's done great, and we appreciate all your efforts.
Good. So highly recommended.
I'm looking forward to finishing my next one, whenever that day may be. But I'd like to get this one going too. So I just, thanks for everything you guys have done for me and will do, and and if I could put in a word for my friend Nina Burley, who was in my original writers group, who says she's flirting with you guys about a novel too.
Yes, I've been talking to her.
Yeah, no, she's an old friend who was in my 1980s writing group and a journalist and blah blah blah, and she's written some serious books. But anyway,
she's great.
Dave's kind of smitten with her.
I'm a little smitten with her, to be honest with her.
Everybody was.
Yeah,
everybody was.
All right.
Thank you,
Mark. Thanks for being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Very good. Thanks.
All right. Bye bye. There he goes.
Yeah. If you want to know about Chicago, especially in the 80s, he captures the.
Look, we are a Chicago Press, Eckhart's Press, and everyone talks about how we only cover Chicago, but man, do we cover Chicago? Right. We love it. And
it's a big market. I mean, it's a
big
lot of stories out there.
All right. So, Dave, we have people to thank.
I'd like to thank Tony Lasano.
Of?
Radio Misfits podcast.
No. Opie Productions.
Opie Productions, but he's in conglomeration.
Okay.
With Radio Misfits.
With whom?
With Ed Silla.
Okay.
This is not on my agenda here. Okay. You give me a sheet, and I'm not a very good ad-libber, obviously.
The Radio Misfits podcast network.
Right. And Ed Silla does the distribution thing, I think.
Yes. Right? And Brandon Herman helps us get guests, although we kind of had an inside track on Mark. Right. But
we thank him anyways.
Thank you very much, Brandon, for all you do for us. And, Dave,
we've been cranking out these interviews.
Pumping them out.
Yeah. I think we should be taking a little break.
I know. Well, I think not.
Okay.
I've got another one ready for you for next week.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Because we're going to be back next week with another episode of
Manoush Celebrity Interview.
The proceeding was a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network. Find our other great shows on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at RadioMisfits.com. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of Opie Productions.
Tony, can you shut up?
Chicago absolutely is the greatest city in the world.